because I am going to be uploading this to my YouTube channel. I was in a discussion in the Broken Crown Discord server. Not really a discussion, just put it out there. And I was saying that that World War III would put the world in an irreversible decline. And I will explain why. First, I'm going to start off on why would Western elites want to start a war that they know would put their nations in brutal declines or collapses, possible collapses. Unintended consequence. For them, that would be I'm going to explain. It's an unintended consequence. Their goal is, with these wars, to try to create the rally around the flag effect. They basically want to try to stabilize their country in a rough political crisis. By unifying them through a war. What will start the war? I could see it, the Korean government, South Korean government collapsing. I see that actually being the most likely, more than Taiwan getting invaded, because North Korea clearly sees South Korea in decline. And their society's rapidly declining birth rates and just overall economic interaction like it's declining, and the political crises become more common in Korean society. North Korea might actually just take advantage of it and just invade them with the backing of China. And China can use that as their excuse to invade Taiwan. So essentially the way it will work is North Korea... by the way, China also has the same problems as the West. But they basically are hemorrhaging at the same time. Their problem, whereas our problems are basically eating us from the inside, they're hemorrhaging these problems. So what we're... Actually, I'm going to just say it a third time. And so China needs a war to rally around the Chinese people to prevent a revolution, to prevent a political crisis from basically killing the current ruling elites, because they're becoming quickly incredibly unpopular. So they basically just give North Korea the blank check, and America will back South Korea, obviously, and same with Japan. The problem is with Japan is the elites are starting to try to do the same thing the Europeans did, which is mass import every foreigner on the face of the fucking earth. The problem is with that, it is not going to work. The Japanese are too homogenous, and they've been too homogenous for so long that it just can't work for them. It won't work for them. So what will end up happening is pogroms will become really common amongst the minority ethnic groups, that like immigrant populations that pop up. And so Japan will have to figure something else out. If it can't do that, then it has to figure something else out. And with the war, it can be the perfect excuse for Japan, a declining nation, who clearly is on the verge of not only like an economic collapse, a political collapse, and due to the low fertility rates of their nation, they need to create some kind of rally around the flag effect so then they can gain support of the government and trust of their government again, so then they can be able to use this. I'm going to use America. America would give Taiwan the blank check or the defense it needs, and same with South Korea, because it also needs some kind of external crisis to prevent a civil war inside the United States. And so they will use this as guys, Taiwan, China's trying to take over the world, and basically ooga booga booga scare America and the American people into this conflict. That, and they'll use some kind of bombing, if you will, giant bombing with thousands or hundreds dead, as like a false flag. You never know with these elites. Europe needs this war because if they don't, the ethnic clashes will become too brutal. Basically, Europe's going to go through a period of civil war with all of with their ethnic the immigrant populations, the invading populations. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're going to snap and they're going to kill them. And that's going to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's going to happen. It can't not happen. And historically, a colonizing ethnic group never not ends up with a fight with the original group. And so these European nations desperately need something to unify their populations to prevent them from just fucking murdering the other populations in their nation, the immigrant populations. So they would try to go and invade Russia before Russia joins the war, because they know which side Russia's going to go on. And I could definitely see Poland starting it. Poland doesn't have a real reason, per se, to start the war in the typical sense of the other European nations needing to rally around the flag effect. Not as much. Other than Poland needing more prestige on the world stage and showing its dominance. So Poland will probably end up invading Belarus, and there's nothing the Belarusians can do. They're just going to get shit stomped. And the Russians backing them is going to have a very difficult time, because Russia's also facing population decline. So now they have much less soldiers to fight the war, and probably almost I'm going to be honest with you, the Ukraine war looks like it's probably going to last for a decade of just retarded fighting. Or maybe less, a little less than that. Actually, about 6 years would be more like it. Yeah, 6 years. If Trump is not able to end the war, and each of these nations, and as in Europe, it's not just one nation, but as many, all share this issue. And so they're going to have to invade. The war at first would almost certainly go in the West's favor in some fronts. In the European front, they would start rolling up the Russians and rolling up the Belarusians and rolling up like a Ukrainian puppet state. And if Serbia, for some suicidal reason, decides to join on Russia's side, and then they would get shit stomped too. And like Iran joining and Iraq, which is a puppet state of Iran, were to join in this war, Israel would join America's side, and Israel would basically just shoot missiles, and Iran couldn't really send soldiers, so it would just kind of stalemate in that front for a while. Though Turkey, however, on the other hand, can go and invade Iraq. But they're also going to invade Syria, so then they can prevent another front from forming. So then they can get rid of the semi-favorable Russians. The Russian-backed leader, dictator. And so Turkey would almost definitely take advantage of it to conquer and then fight the Iraqis and the Iranians along the Kurdish front. Then you're going to see South Korea is going to get rolled up real quick. At first, they're going to hold strong, and then they're going to get rolled because they can't replace them. The Koreans can replace them. No matter how bad their morale is, they still can replace them. And all this neat and fancy tech ain't gonna save the Koreans when the North Koreans, when they have manpower and the South Koreans don't. And they're gonna get rolled up until the Americans come and save them, and then the French are gonna turn around real quick. The Chinese are gonna come in, and then the French are gonna be forcefully stabilized for months on end. And then we're going to see Taiwan by itself is probably going to be fine pushing off an invasion. The reason is because it's basically been preparing for an invasion its entire existence, and the island's a really fortified island. It would be obscenely difficult for the Chinese army to actually go, the commies, to actually be able to take this island. So they would basically struggle throughout the entire war. But slowly but surely, the casualties are going to start mounting on every front, as many other minor players join in on either side of the war. It slowly devolves into a brutal, messy conflict that these people already didn't want to fight. After like the first 2 years, the rally around the flag effect is going to be completely gone and is going to be replaced with war weariness. And I'm not talking about light war weariness. I'm talking like already at 100%. They want to get out of the war. They're done. No more fighting. And in the case of America, it would maybe be a year, maybe a year and a half before war weariness kicks in really quick, as the war becomes super vicious, and then each of these nations, slowly but surely, I could see first Russia, as its front's getting rolled up, just collapses into a civil war. Because their government is getting humiliated over and over and over again. There's nothing they can do. And the Russian government, who couldn't provide enough for its people, as well on top of that, just falls apart. The entire government falls apart, and a civil war breaks out. Europe's probably going to withdraw from large sections of Russia, except for the parts that they want to take. And the reason is because they have no reason to get involved in the warring factions and basically just lose men to attrition over time and pointlessly dying on the various sides of the Russian civil war, if you will. So they would probably end up falling back or holding where they were, wherever they were. And China will be forced to eventually try to push men, which they've already probably by that point been pushing men for a few years, or about a year, to like help the Russians out. But the Chinese people quickly realize that no matter how much state propaganda they get shoved in their face, they know they're not winning this war. And with all the other compounding issues in China, their nation will also collapse into a civil war. North and South Korea will probably end up continuing their conflict even after China collapses, because the North Koreans basically at that point sees it as we take all or we die. And so they're kind of at that point where they're going to have to fight to the end. America, and the American people being so sick and tired of a war and it being so starkly divided between the left and the right, the left supporting the war and the right not supporting the war, to the point where people just say, nah, we're good. And it leads to massive riots, and these riots turn into basically mini revolts. And as factions start fighting each other on each side, it basically states that are very far left or very far right. I don't mean far right as in the leftist sense, but like actually far right. As state polarization becomes more and more obvious, the disgruntled political minority will start launching revolts to try to gain control over their state. In some cases. In other cases, they're trying to gain control over the federal government, and the military will start fracturing along those lines. And same with the National Guard. Will side along each faction or stay loyal to the federal government or the state governments. And basically the entire government's gonna collapse into anarchy. And then the European countries are gonna fall into their ethnic conflicts because they can't really explain the war, and I'm sure the ethnic minorities are not going to be the ones who fight a large part of the war, which is going to lead to a lot of resentment, and it's going to turn into vicious fighting, and then the Arabs are going to fight back, and then it's going to be basically civil wars across those nations. Africa, completely reliant on both the East and the West for their bullshit, such as food and money. Them not getting that, their populations will decline. India is reliant on a lot of exports in some aspects, but I could definitely see India decline very rapidly as the rest of the world kind of does the same. In the end, there wouldn't really be a peace deal. I don't think there would ever be really a peace deal to end the war, per se. Because there isn't a nation left on its 2 feet that can do that. There's, like Canada, similar concept, civil wars. Well, I think at the end of the war,